My Playful Wife. Episode 5. The Rules Change. Written by Mia. There is no manual for this. I want to be clear about that because when I look back at those weeks, I can see that I was inventing everything as I went. Every response, every silence, every gesture of acceptance or withdrawal, with nothing to work from. No model. No precedent in my own life or anyone else's that I could observe. My parents had a conventional marriage. 40 years, a house in Nagpur, a rhythm so established that they moved through their days like two instruments playing a piece they'd memorized long ago. As far as I knew, they had been faithful to it. As far as I knew, that qualifier had taken on new weight since October. My friends' marriages were either visibly happy or quietly not, in ways nobody discussed across dinner tables. My colleagues' marriages were efficiently invisible, the kind that exists in the background of a life rather than at the center of it. None of them gave me what I needed. None of the films I had seen. None of the books I had read. None of the conversations I had overheard in offices and dabbas and family gatherings where people talked about marriage the way they talked about weather, as something that happened to you, that you endured or enjoyed, that was essentially outside your control. I was living in an arrangement that had no name. I was building its rules in real time, under conditions that made careful building difficult, with materials I had not ordered and did not entirely understand. So I started with what I had, myself, the specific person I was, the capacities and limits of that person which I was discovering through use, the way you discover the load-bearing properties of a wall by pressing on it. The first rule I arrived at was, do not ask directly. Not because I was afraid of the answers, though some part of me that still needed protecting was afraid, but because I understood with growing clarity that the direct question would rupture something that was functioning. The arrangement we had achieved, the shared agreement to operate without defining, to hold the thing without naming it, was working. It was fragile and strange and cost me something daily, but it was working. And the direct question would force it into a shape it was not yet ready to hold. So I did not ask. I held it without handles. This required more of me than I expected. The impulse to ask is its own kind of pressure. It builds in the chest. It comes up at odd moments, at breakfast, in lifts, while I was driving home and had 40 minutes to think. What is this? How long has it been? Does she love him? I put those questions aside with the careful deliberateness of a person organizing a room they can't yet deal with. The second rule was, look. I had always been, by nature, a man who moved through life at slightly less than full attention. Present enough to function, engaged enough to be considered a good person to know, but not really looking in the sense that I mean here, looking at the specific texture of things, at what was actually there rather than what I expected to find. The kitchen had changed this. I had started in the weeks after October to see my wife differently. Not as a new person, she had always been who she was, but with new eyes. As though someone had cleaned a window I hadn't known was dirty. I watched her pour chai and noticed the way she held the pan, one-handed, without thinking, the grip of someone completely confident in the action. I watched her speak on the phone with her mother and heard the voice she used. Warm, dutiful, love administered in careful doses. The voice of a woman who loves her mother and also knows exactly where that love ends. I watched her in the workroom, the door not quite closed, and heard the sounds she made when she was working. The occasional murmur, the huff of frustration, the quiet sound of satisfaction when something went right. I watched her sleep. She slept on her side with one hand tucked under her chin, like a child, and her face in sleep lost the confidence that structured it during the day and revealed something else, something unresolved, something still in process. I lay beside her at night and watched her face and thought, I have been sleeping next to this person for 3 years, and I am only now learning her. This is what watching does to you. It makes you a student. It makes you humble in ways that anger is too loud to allow. The third rule surprised me most. Stay. I had expected, in those first bewildering days after October, to want to leave. I had expected the ground to shift so completely that I would find myself standing in a different life. The one where I packed a bag and said what needed to be said and remade myself as someone who had not tolerated this. That life existed in my imagination. It was clean and had a certain dignity to it. But the leaving impulse never came. What came instead was, I want to use the right word, depth. The marriage had been, before, a pleasant surface. We had been good together in the ways that good marriages are good. Companionable, warm, functional. We had not had the kind of problems that required intervention. We had been, by external measure, fine.
Now, we were not fine.
We were complicated, and the complication had added layers, uncomfortable ones, painful ones that woke me at 4 a.m. with the cold clarity of someone who has been handed more reality than they ordered. But also, real ones, true ones. I was angry sometimes. I want to say this plainly, because I am not interested in presenting a version of this story in which I was nobler than I was. I was not an enlightened being who had transcended ordinary human feeling. Some mornings I woke up, and the anger was right there, clean and cold, and for a few minutes it was the realest thing in the room. Rage at her, at Piyush, at the easy way she moved through a world she had apparently decided to arrange for her own satisfaction, at my own inexplicable tolerance of all of it, at the fact that I was lying here choosing to stay rather than choosing the clean exit. The rage always passed. It took varying amounts of time, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes 3 days of careful management. But it always passed. And on the other side of it, the same thing. My wife, making tea, choosing me.
Because she was choosing me.
Every morning, in the practical architecture of our shared life, she chose me. She made the chai and put it at my right hand before I asked. She kept track of things I had told her once months ago and acted on them when the moment came. She was there, in this flat, with me, not because she had nowhere else to be, but because she had decided that this was where she was. I held on to this not as consolation, but as fact. The month between visits, November into December, was ordinary by external measure. Work, home, dinner, weekends. The city going about its business around us. Saloni had started what would eventually become the first collection. She didn't call it that yet, didn't have the frame for it, but I could see it beginning. The dark rose silk appeared and disappeared from the workroom. She had started 2 other pieces alongside it, the beginnings of a conversation between fabrics, a visual argument she was having with herself about what she wanted to say. She showed me a sketch one evening without preamble. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed with her sketchbook, still in the clothes she'd worn to a meeting, and she simply held it up.
No explanation.
No tell me what you think, or do you like it? Just here. I took the sketchbook. It was a blouse or the top half of something, architectural, structured, the kind of thing that required the silk to do something precise rather than simply exist. She had drawn it in clean lines with notes in the margins. The neckline lower than she usually wore. The back, I looked at the back more carefully, almost bare. 2 straps crossing between the shoulder blades, nothing else. For whom? I asked.
For me, she said.
I looked at the sketch for a moment longer. The back, the straps. the expanse of skin that would be there when this thing was made and worn. "You'll freeze," I said. "Probably," she agreed. She took the sketchbook back. She didn't look at me. She looked at the sketch. "When will it be done?" I asked. "When it's ready," she said. I looked at the side of her face, the specific quality of her attention when she was in the middle of something, total, given without remainder. She gave that attention to fabric and to the people she cared for with the same completeness, and I had spent 3 years on the receiving end of it and had perhaps taken its completeness for granted. "Okay," I said. She made a small note in the margin, her handwriting small and precise. One evening in the 3rd week of November, I came home to find Saloni on the phone in the bedroom, door not quite closed. I set my bag down. I went to the kitchen. I filled a glass of water and stood at the counter and held it and did not drink it. I could hear, not words, not content, just the temperature of it, her voice through the not quite closed door, the private register, the warm one, the unguarded one, the one that lived below her public voice like something that only surfaces in particular conditions. I drank the water. The call ended. She came to the kitchen a few minutes later with the ease of someone who has just had a good conversation. Shoulders dropped, something released, her face with the softness it gets when she has been somewhere she wanted to be. "Good day?" I asked. "Getting better," she said. She kissed my cheek. Her lips were warm. "Better now." This was the thing about Saloni. She did not hide what she felt. She was incapable of the complete concealment that might have made things simpler, that might have allowed both of us to maintain the fiction of a marriage that existed in only one dimension. She came to me warmed by other people, and she did not pretend she hadn't been, and she came to me with her care for me fully and genuinely intact, and she held both of these things simultaneously without apology or explanation. I was beginning to understand that this was not selfishness. I was beginning to understand, slowly, through the daily process of choosing the second road over and over, that it was, in its way, a form of respect. She was not hiding from me. She was trusting me with the full complexity of who she was. That trust was its own kind of gift, even when it cost. "What's for dinner?" I asked. "Whatever you want," she said. "I was waiting for you." The night before Piyush's 3rd visit, I couldn't sleep. This was not unusual. I had become, since October, a man who woke at odd hours and lay awake thinking the thoughts that daylight made it easier to avoid. But this night was different. The thoughts were different. Less pain and more something. I lay in the dark and listened to Saloni breathe beside me. Slow and deep, the breathing of someone completely at rest. I had learned to read the sleep sounds of this woman. I knew the particular depth of her breathing that meant she was dreaming versus the shallower rhythm of lighter sleep. This was deep. She was far away. I looked at the ceiling. I thought about the fact that tomorrow Piyush would arrive. I examined this thought carefully, turning it over, looking for the thing I expected to find, the dread, the contraction, the specific tightening that had been there before his previous visits. It wasn't there, or rather, it was there, but it was not the largest thing. Underneath it and around it, and in the strange spaces between the grief and the anger and the complicated arousal that I still hadn't found a clean way to think about, underneath all of that was something I had to look at directly because I owed myself honesty. I was looking forward to it. Not to the injury, not to the specific ache of watching them together, but to what the visits did to Saloni. The weeks before, the sharpening of her, the energy that entered her in the days of preparation, the specific alive quality that filled the flat, and the quality of her attention to me in the wake of the visits, the depth of it, the presence in it, as though she returned from somewhere full and wanted to give. I had always been given her best self. I was receiving it still. The fact that her best self was more complicated than I had known did not change that it was being given. I rolled onto my side. Saloni, in her deep sleep, shifted slightly. The automatic adjustment of a body that knows another body is near, moving toward it the way plants turn toward light, without decision.
Her back was warm against my chest.
I put my hand on her waist, lightly, barely touching. Tomorrow Piyush arrives, I thought.
And good.
The word arrived without irony, without qualification. I held it in the dark for a long time. It did not change. It remained what it was, real, true, mine. I was beginning to understand something that I would not fully understand for many more months, that the line between suffering and love is not where most people draw it, that the things we choose to carry and the people we choose to carry them for tell us more about who we are than all the easier choices combined. I was carrying something difficult. I had been carrying it since October, and I was still here, in this bed, in this marriage, with my hand on this woman's waist, choosing. Not because I was a saint, not because I had no other options, because I had looked at the options and found that this complicated, painful, alive, real thing was the one I wanted. Outside, the city settling into the deep part of the night. A dog somewhere distant, the sound of a train. I closed my eyes. I had a conversation with my mother that month that I did not expect to have. She called on a Sunday the way she always called, at noon, when she knew I'd be home, the call an institution as much as a contact. We talked about the usual things, my father's health, a cousin's upcoming wedding, the price of vegetables, the small inflation of ordinary life. She asked about Saloni, and I said she was well, which was true. Then she said, "You sound different." Different how? I said.
Older, she said.
More settled, like something has resolved. I thought about what had resolved, about the second road and the framework and the months of building, about the version of myself that had stood on that balcony in October, bewildered and broken open, and the version that was standing here now in March talking to his mother on the phone. Some things have, I said, which was honest without being specific. Good, she said. That's good.
A pause.
Marriage does that sometimes.
Settles people into themselves.
Your father was a different man at 33 than he was at 30.
How?
I said. Less afraid, she said. More willing to be what he was. Marriage showed him who he was, I think. The having to live with someone, really live, not perform, it strips things down. I thought about this, about what my marriage had stripped down, the assumptions, the comfortable distance, the idea that I already knew. Yes, I said. That's right. She's good for you, my mother said. Saloni. Whatever else, she's good for you. Yes, I said. She is. My mother said something about the cousin's wedding, and the conversation moved on. But I held what she had said, the having to live with someone, really live, not perform. It strips things down. What was left after the stripping was what was actually there. What was actually there, I was finding, was better than what I'd had before. The Bengaluru news had come through properly that month. Not a rumor, not an overture, but a formal offer with a number attached. I had heard Saloni's voice on the phone when Piyush called to tell her, heard the specific quality of her silence when she received the information, heard the things she said that were not about what she was feeling. That evening I asked her, "Do you want him to stay?" She looked at me from across the kitchen table. We were having the late dinner we often had on the nights she worked long hours, simple food, both of us tired. "That's not the right question," she said. "What's the right question?" "Whether I want what's right for him." She was looking at her food. "Those are different questions."
I thought about this.
About the difference between what we want and what we want for someone. The specific generosity required to hold both. "Do you?" I said. "Want what's right for him?" She looked up, met my eyes. "Yes," she said. "More than I want what's easy for me." I looked at her, at the particular quality of what she was carrying. Not martyrdom, not performance, but the genuine cost of loving someone enough to want their good thing over your preferred thing. "That's love," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Something moved in her expression. "Yes," she said, quietly. "I suppose it is." We ate the rest of the meal in a quiet that was not uncomfortable but full, the specific fullness of a silence that has something real in it. Later, washing up together at the sink, she said without turning, "He'll come back. At Diwali, probably. He'll always come back." "I know," I said. "And things don't have to." She was searching for the word. "The important things don't have to change." I thought about what the important things were, what I would protect if I were asked to name it. "No," I said. "They don't." She passed me a bowl to dry. Our hands didn't quite touch, but they were close enough that I felt the warmth of her. "The blouse is almost done," she said. "I know," I said. "I can hear you in the workroom." "Does it bother you?" "No," I said honestly. "It's the opposite of bother." She looked at me sideways, the small private smile. "Good," she said. To be continued in episode 6, the third visit.
Simbolo di copyright mia.
All rights reserved. That was episode 5 of My Playful Wife. If this story is staying with you, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus chapters are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
Ai mia.
Thank you for listening.